President William Ruto addresses Parliament this Thursday. The cost of living remains a key concern, with Parliament expected to play a role in taming the high cost of commodities. Regina Manyara explores possible options to make the bottom-up economic model deliver for Wanjiku and the role Parliament will be playing in taming the high cost of living that has seen the rate of inflation hit a 62-month high.
Of President William Ruto's maiden address of the 13th Parliament, Kenyans are reeling from the high cost of living, highlighted by costly basic commodities and fuel.
Imekuwa ngumu kwangu. Maana kama nilikuwa na afford nafikia mahali unaweza enda nyumba kama ni one bedroom ushuke uende bed sit, ama two bedroom uende one bedroom. So imeni affect sana katika hii biashara yangu nafanya.
Teteza zile zinauzwa inategemea mafuta. Kwa hivyo mafuta ikipanda pia unga itapanda, kila kitu kinapanda.
Tangu kuja hapa kwa stage asubuhi hatujaweka fuel. Customer pia hakuna.
Waliahidi wa Kenya wapunguze mafuta.
To enhance food production, the government plans to expand the fertilizer subsidy program.
The government has commenced consultations with key actors and stakeholders to ensure quality, affordable and accessible fertilizer that will be available to all farmers.
In June this year, the 12th Parliament approved the raising of the debt ceiling from 9 trillion shillings to 10 trillion shillings. This was despite an earlier suggestion from the then senior National Treasury officials that Parliament lifts the debt ceiling to 12 trillion shillings to offer the government more headroom for borrowing to finance government operations. As at December last year, public debt was at 8.2 trillion shillings.
Something we have to do out of necessity to save the budget for this year, to save the generations to come, to ensure that the new administration can have a budget that they can implement.
However much you try to cook GDP on NPV terms at 55%, we would still be below the 9 trillion debt that we have today, Honorable Speaker.
Of the public debt, commercial loans account for about 30% of external loans, while bilateral loans take up 30%.
Of the common framework to suspend or reschedule debt repayments by middle-income countries during the pandemic recovery period.
Will the 13th Parliament raise the debt ceiling? And is Kenya's debt situation sustainable?
For every 100 shillings, 40 shillings go to debt service. So you begin to ask yourself, but wait a second, what about salaries? What about medicine? What about building roads?
Servicing the country's debt currently consumes 63.5% of tax revenues.
We are chained to many debts. 65% of all the taxes we collect, we use to pay debt.
What of development projects and economic recovery?
We'll put brakes on unbudgeted projects. In fact, that is the biggest source of our problem. Projects that are not within the budget, so that we cannot keep our fiscal deficit at what we have committed, 5% or 5.9%.
According to audit firm PKF Consulting, development projects worth over 9 trillion shillings remain stalled, among them roads, office blocks, dams and irrigation projects, schools and hospitals, and is denying the country the benefits envisioned by these projects.
The amount of debt we procured, the places that debt was put in terms of the spending priorities, have not been giving us returns, forcing the government to borrow more and more, to an extent that we are borrowing more than our ability to pay.
The government is torn between increasing taxes or borrowing from outside or internally. As a politician, you are better off borrowing money because you don't annoy a lot of voters. If you ask a person on the streets who is going to pay that debt, he will say somebody, but we don't know who it is. But when you have taxes, it impacts you immediately. That is why politicians prefer to borrow. They can even pass that to the next government.
President Ruto urged the G20 nations to expand their common framework to suspend debt repayment for middle-income countries struggling to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Kenya and the rest of Africa, like other developing nations, are in need of greater international partnership and cooperation to avert economic crisis in the wake of the pandemic. developing countries being heavily burdened by external debt servicing run the risk of losing development gains due to the shocks inflicted by the pandemic.
President William Ruto made the economy the main focus of his campaign, promising Kenyans a radical transformation if he won. It came to pass, and now to make this a reality, his administration requires money and new economic structures. He needs the legislature to share in his vision.
Tuna vijana ambayo wamemaliza form 4, wengine hata wanataka kwenda university na hatuna uwezo, chakula imepanda, aweze kutusaidia hata vijana wetu wakipata hata kama ni kazi ya kufagia hapa town. Tutafurahia kwa sababu sisi ni watu wa bottom up, wale wa chini. Alisema ya kwamba atainua wa chini.
Mambo ya mafuta ya kupigia chakula imepanda sana, sabuni imepanda sana, hata kuoga tutaweza kuoga.
Maana watu wa chini wengi kidogo maisha imewakalia. So ni vyema wakati wanaingia waangalia hawa watu wa chini kabisa.
Regina Manyara reporting for KBC Channel 1.